Picture this. It's a frozen December night in 1724, deep in the German countryside. Snow falls silently on the cobblestone streets of Königsberg, and the world sleeps peacefully. But in a candlelit study on the third floor of the Royal Anatomical Institute, a man is about to commit the most horrifying act of scientific inquiry in human history. His name is Dr. Stubbe Pelagius, and he is arguably the most brilliant anatomist of his age. He has dissected hundreds of corpses, mapped every nerve and vessel in the human body, and published groundbreaking treatises on anatomy that are still referenced today. But tonight, he sits hunched over his desk, a small silver surgical saw glinting in the candlelight, preparing to answer the one question that has consumed his brilliant mind for decades. Where exactly does the human soul reside? And to find that answer, he's about to cut open his own skull and eat his own brain. Before we witness this act of ultimate scientific madness, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below with your country or city. It's incredible that we can connect from all corners of the globe to explore these dark chapters of human ambition. And if you're fascinated by these tales of genius turned to horror, consider hitting that subscribe button, because history's shadows hold many more secrets to reveal. To understand how a brilliant man could arrive at such a grotesque conclusion, you must first understand the world that shaped Dr. Stubbe Pelagius. Born in 1675 in a small Prussian village, Stubbe was a child prodigy who could recite entire medical texts by age 12. His father, a village physician, recognized his son's extraordinary gifts and sent him to study at the University of Leipzig, where he excelled in anatomy, philosophy, and theology. But Stubbe lived in an age of profound intellectual upheaval. The Enlightenment was dawning, and for the first time in human history, men were beginning to believe that every mystery of existence could be solved through reason and observation. The Church, which had long claimed dominion over questions of the soul, was losing its grip on the minds of Europe's intellectuals. Stubbe became obsessed with a single question that tormented the greatest thinkers of his era. If man is made of flesh and blood, where does the soul reside? The Church insisted it was an ethereal, non-physical essence, but Stubbe, with his anatomist's precision, believed everything must have a physical location. He was convinced that consciousness, memory, and the very essence of human identity, what we call the soul, must be housed somewhere in the brain tissue itself. This was not mere philosophical curiosity. This was an obsession that would consume his life and ultimately destroy it. In 1698, at age 23, Stubbe was appointed Royal Anatomist to the court of Frederick I of Prussia. It was a prestigious position that gave him unlimited access to the bodies of executed criminals for his research. While other anatomists were content to map the basic structures of the human body, Stubbe had a different focus entirely. He became known for his meticulous dissections of the brain, spending days examining every fold, every groove, every minute structure of the organ he believed held the key to human consciousness. His early work was brilliant and groundbreaking. He was the first to identify certain neural pathways, the first to map specific regions of the brain with remarkable accuracy. His detailed anatomical drawings were works of art as much as science, but his colleagues began to notice something disturbing about his methods. Stubbe insisted on working alone, often through the night. Strange smells began emanating from his laboratory, not just the usual odor of preserving chemicals, but something else, something that made visitors gag and quickly excuse themselves. When questioned, Stubbe would only say that he was conducting advanced preservation experiments to better study brain tissue. The truth, which wouldn't be discovered until after his death, was far more horrifying. Stubbe had become convinced that to truly understand consciousness, he needed to examine brain tissue while it was still alive, still containing what he believed to be the essence of the person's soul. Preserved specimens, he reasoned, were like empty houses. The soul had already departed, so he began timing his dissections to coincide with executions. He would rush the still warm heads of the executed to his laboratory and immediately begin his examinations, frantically trying to identify the physical location of consciousness before it faded away. But this still wasn't enough. The tissue was dead, even if only recently so. It was then that Stubbe crossed a line that even his most radical contemporaries would find unthinkable. He began conducting what he called vitality experiments on living tissue. Using a network of grave robbers and body snatchers, he acquired fresh corpses, some perhaps not quite as dead as their sources claimed. In the basement of the Anatomical Institute, he set up a secret laboratory where he could work undisturbed. The exact details of what happened in that underground chamber were recorded in Stubbe's private journals, written in a coded Latin script that wasn't deciphered until the 1890s. What those journals revealed was a descent into methodical madness. Stubbe had developed a technique for keeping brain tissue alive for hours after death by using a primitive system of pumps and heated blood substitutes. He would extract portions of brain tissue and immediately consume them, believing that ingesting the physical matter of consciousness would allow him to experience the memories and thoughts of the deceased. His journals describe the taste in clinical detail. The cortex possesses a texture reminiscent of soft cheese, with a metallic undertone that intensifies when consumed immediately upon extraction. I can feel the knowledge transferring, though the process requires refinement. But consuming the brains of corpses wasn't giving him the answers he sought. Dead brain tissue, no matter how fresh, was still dead. The soul, he became convinced, could only be truly studied while fully alive and conscious. By 1720, Stubbe had reached a terrifying conclusion. If he wanted to truly map the soul's location in the brain, he would need to examine his own brain tissue while his consciousness was still intact. He spent 4 years developing what he called his conscious autopsy technique. Using a combination of mirrors, local anesthetics derived from plant extracts, and surgical instruments of his own design, Stubbe planned to remove and examine portions of his own brain while remaining awake and alert. He would consume each piece immediately, documenting any changes in his consciousness, memory, or perception. His final journal entries, dated December 1724, describe his preparation with the cold precision of a man planning a routine experiment. Day 1, have completed final preparations for the conscious examination. The silver saw, sharpened to perfection, awaits. I have fasted for 3 days to ensure clarity of thought. Tonight, I shall map the geography of my own soul. Day 2, initial incision completed without incident. Pain is manageable with the coca leaf extract. The skull opens like a flower blooming in reverse. I can see my own brain tissue pulsing with life. The moment of truth approaches. Day 3, first sampling complete. Consumed approximately 2 grams of frontal cortex tissue. Taste is as expected, though intensity is heightened by knowledge of source. No immediate change in consciousness detected. Must proceed to deeper structures. The entries continue for 7 more days, each one more erratic than the last. His handwriting, normally precise and elegant, becomes increasingly shaky and illegible. The clinical tone gives way to rambling observations and bizarre philosophical insights. Day 6. The boundaries of self are becoming fluid. I am both observer and observed, consumer and consumed. The soul, I believe, is not located in any single region, but distributed throughout. I can taste my memories. Childhood summers have a sweet undertone. Mathematical theorems are surprisingly bitter. Day 7. Process becomes routine now. Colours taste different and numbers make sounds I've never heard before. Day 8. Mother appeared today, though she died 20 years hence. She warned me about the hungry darkness that follows those who feast upon themselves. I explained my methodology, but she would not listen. Memory and reality no longer maintain their proper boundaries. Day 10. I understand now. The soul is not contained within the brain. The brain is contained within the soul. Each piece I consume diminishes the whole, yet illuminates. The pattern is fractal, infinite regression of consciousness consuming consciousness. I am becoming hollow, filled only with the knowledge of my own emptiness. On December 15th, 1724, Stubbe's assistant Wilhelm arrived for their usual morning meeting to find the laboratory door locked from the inside. No amount of knocking could rouse his master. When the authorities finally broke down the door, the scene they discovered was something that would haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives. Stubbe was found seated at his desk, his head tilted back at an unnatural angle. The top of his skull had been carefully removed and set aside like the lid of a jar. His brain was partially missing, with surgical precision cuts indicating that portions had been systematically removed. On the desk before him lay a silver spoon, still stained with brain matter, and his final journal entry. I have found it. The seat of the soul is not in the brain, but in the act of seeking itself. Consciousness is not contained, but is the container. I am no longer hungry, for I have consumed myself entirely and discovered that I was never really here at all. The great joke is that the soul cannot be found because it is the finder. I am empty now, but perfectly so. His body showed no signs of struggle or external violence. He had, quite literally, eaten himself to death in a methodical, scientific manner. The authorities, horrified by the implications, immediately sealed Stubbe's laboratory and ordered all his research destroyed. The official cause of death was listed as sudden apoplexy, a stroke. The truth was buried along with his mutilated remains. The Church and the Prussian authorities moved quickly to suppress any record of Stubbe's final experiments. His published works on anatomy remained in circulation, but all mention of his research into consciousness was expunged from official records. His underground laboratory was sealed with cement, and his assistants were sworn to secrecy under threat of execution. But whispers spread through the medical community. Other anatomists began reporting strange dreams after reading Stubbe's legitimate anatomical texts. Some claimed they could taste copper when examining brain tissue. A few reported an irresistible urge to bite into the specimens they were studying. Within a decade, a small but growing number of anatomists across Europe began conducting their own consciousness experiments. The practice became known in whispered circles as Pelagian consumption, the belief that ingesting brain tissue could transfer knowledge and memories. The outbreak of what modern historians call the anatomist madness swept through European medical schools in the 1730s and 1740s. Dozens of promising young doctors were found dead in their laboratories, their skulls opened, their brains partially consumed. Each one left behind journals describing their quest to understand consciousness through direct consumption. The epidemic only ended when the medical establishment began requiring anatomists to work in pairs, making it impossible to conduct such experiments in secret. What makes Stubbe's story so deeply unsettling is not just its grotesque nature, but how familiar his obsession feels today. We live in an age where neuroscientists map the brain with unprecedented precision, where philosophers debate the hard problem of consciousness, and where technology companies promise to upload our minds to computers. Stubbe's fundamental question, where is the self located in the brain, remains one of the central mysteries of modern science. We've identified regions associated with memory, emotion, and sensory processing, but we still cannot pinpoint the seat of consciousness itself. His method was horrifying, but his goal was essentially the same as today's consciousness researchers: to understand what makes us who we are. The only difference is that we use fMRI scanners instead of silver spoons. In Silicon Valley, entrepreneurs spend billions trying to decode and digitize consciousness. In research labs around the world, scientists attempt to understand how subjective experience emerges from neural activity. They all seek what Stubbe sought: to map the territory of the soul. The terrifying truth that Stubbe discovered in his final mad experiment was that consciousness cannot be found because it is not a thing but a process. It's not contained in the brain but emerges from the brain's activity. He literally consumed himself trying to find what was never there to be found. His mangled corpse, found hunched over his desk with his skull cracked open like an egg, serves as a permanent warning about the dangers of reducing human consciousness to mere matter. Some mysteries, his death suggests, are not meant to be solved by consuming them. The next time you look in a mirror and wonder where you really reside in that 3-pound mass of tissue behind your eyes, remember Dr. Stubbe Pelagius. Remember the man who tried to eat his way to enlightenment and discovered that the seeker and the sought were always the same thing. He found his answer, but the price was everything that made him human. In trying to locate his soul, he consumed it entirely, leaving behind only an empty skull and a profound warning written in his own blood: some hungers can never be satisfied, no matter how much you feed them. The brain tissue he consumed so methodically contained no soul because the soul was in the consuming itself, in the consciousness that sought to understand consciousness. He was looking for himself in the very act of looking, like trying to bite your own teeth. Dr. Stubbe Pelagius, the brilliant anatomist who mapped every nerve and vessel in the human body, who published groundbreaking research that advanced medical science, who could recite entire medical texts from memory, died having learned the ultimate truth. We are not what we think we are, but the thinking itself, and that knowledge once consumed cannot be digested.